Close your eyes for a moment and listen. Can you hear it, not with your ears, but with something deeper? A faint, resonant hum on the very edge of perception. A vibration that seems to come not from the world around you, but from the emptiness between the stars and the silence within the ancient stones. It's a sound that has echoed through the mists of time, a secret whispered on the wind through the sacred oak groves of a long-forgotten world. This is the world of the Celts, but not as you think you know it. We've all seen the images, the Druids in white robes, the mysterious stone circles standing sentinel against the sky. We've been told these were people deeply connected to the earth, to the seasons, to the tangible world they could see and touch. But what if that connection ran infinitely deeper? What if their most profound rituals were not about worshipping the sun or the moon, but about communing with the vast, invisible fabric of the cosmos itself? What if the Celts were not just earth worshippers, but the first cosmologists, attempting to understand a mysterious, unseen force that binds the universe together, a concept we today call dark matter? This idea might seem astonishing, a bridge too far between ancient mysticism and modern astrophysics. We are taught to see history as a linear progression, where our scientific understanding is the pinnacle of human thought. But what if some ancient cultures possessed a different kind of knowledge, one born not from particle accelerators and telescopes, but from a profound, intuitive relationship with the universe? The Celts left no written records of their deepest beliefs. Their secrets were passed down through an oral tradition so sacred that to write them down was to profane them. This was a knowledge felt in the bone, seen in the patterns of the stars, and heard in the sacred silence of their rituals. They perceived the world as being full of forces and energies that were invisible to the eye, yet undeniable in their influence. They called this the Otherworld, a realm intertwined with our own, populated by spirits and deities. But what if the Otherworld was their way of conceptualizing the immense, unseen mass that physicists now tell us makes up over 85% of the universe? So today, we embark on a journey to uncover the secret dark matter rituals of the Celts. We will venture beyond the familiar Druids and stone circles to explore a cosmology so advanced it challenges our very understanding of history. We will decode the symbols carved into standing stones that might be maps of cosmic forces, and we will listen to the echoes of chants that were perhaps designed not just to honor the gods, but to resonate with the fundamental vibrations of reality. This is not a story of magic versus science, but a story of a lost science of the unseen, a testament to human curiosity that spans millennia. It is a promise to unveil secrets lost to time, to explore how a civilization with nothing but their senses and their intellect might have grasped the invisible architecture of the cosmos. Prepare to see the ancient world in a completely new light as we begin to unravel one of history's greatest enigmas. To truly understand what we are calling Celtic dark matter, we must first step into their worldview and grasp the nature of the Anon, the Otherworld. Think of it not as a heaven or a hell located in some distant galaxy, but as a parallel dimension existing right here, interwoven with our own reality like the threads in a vast cosmic tapestry. This is the crucial first step. For the Celts, the universe was not a collection of separate, isolated places. It was a single, living entity with multiple, simultaneous layers of existence. Our world, the land of the living, was just one layer. The Otherworld was another, a realm of immense power, the source of all life, magic, and destiny, inhabited by deities, spirits, and ancestors. But here is the profound parallel. Just as modern physics tells us that dark matter is invisible, undetectable by ordinary means, yet makes up the overwhelming majority of the universe's mass and governs the motion of galaxies, the Celts believed the Otherworld was equally invisible to the everyday eye, yet it was the fundamental force that shaped their entire reality. The success of a harvest, the outcome of a battle, the health of a chieftain, all were believed to be direct consequences of the state and the favor of this unseen realm. This belief in a permeating, influential, unseen force is what makes the analogy so compelling. The Celts didn't have the concepts of wimps or actions, the hypothetical particles that scientists search for today. Instead, they had a sophisticated understanding of influence. They observed that things happened in their world for reasons they could not always see. A sudden blight on a crop, an unexpected victory, a prophetic dream, these were not random events. They were evidence of the actions and currents flowing from the otherworld. This unseen force was not passive, it was dynamic and interactive. It could be appealed to, negotiated with, and accessed through correct action and understanding. And this is where the concept of liminality becomes absolutely essential. The Celts believed that the veil between our world and the other world was thinnest at specific, in-between places and times. These were the doorways, the cosmic portals where one could potentially cross over, or more commonly, where the power of the Anon would bleed through into our reality. These liminal places were everywhere in the Celtic landscape. A mist-shrouded lake at dawn, neither fully water nor fully sky, was a gateway. A deep, ancient forest where sunlight barely pierced the canopy, creating a world between light and shadow, was another. But most famously, they were the man-made and natural structures we still marvel at today. The great stone circles like Stonehenge, which acted as resonant chambers for cosmic energy, and the vast chambered tombs like Newgrange, where on the winter solstice, a single beam of sunlight would illuminate a chamber deep within the earth, symbolizing the ultimate connection between the world living and the world of the spirits. Time was just as important as place. Dawn and dusk, the transitions between day and night, were potent moments. The festival of Samhain, which we know as Halloween, marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. It was believed that on this night the boundary between the worlds dissolved and the spirits could walk freely among the living. So, when we use the term Celtic dark matter, we are referring to this entire cosmological system. The belief in an all-pervading, invisible reality that underpins and influences our own, accessible only through specific, ritualized interactions at these liminal points of contact. It was the fundamental substrate of their existence, the hidden framework upon which their visible world was built. Their rituals, then, were not mere superstition. They were a sophisticated technology of interaction, a method for tapping into this cosmic source code, for aligning their lives with the fundamental, unseen currents of the universe. This intricate, layered reality wasn't chaotic or random. For the Celts, the cosmos operated on a principle of sacred balance, a harmonious flow of energy between the three realms. The upper world provided the blueprint, the celestial laws and seasonal cycles that governed life. The middle world was the stage where that life played out. But the lower world, the otherworld, was the engine room. It was the source of the raw, creative, and sometimes chaotic power that fueled everything. The ultimate goal of their spiritual life was not to worship one realm over the others, but to maintain a perfect equilibrium between them. A successful society was one in which the order of the heavens was reflected in the justice of the tribe, and the vital force of the otherworld was flowing healthily into the land, ensuring fertility and prosperity. This is where our dark matter analogy becomes incredibly potent. Think of the otherworld as this immense reservoir of invisible mass and energy. If it were completely blocked off from our middle world, life would stagnate, crops would fail, and the people would lose their connection to magic and destiny. But if the flow from that realm became too strong, too uncontrolled, it would be equally catastrophic. It would be like a cosmic dam breaking, an overwhelming surge of raw, untamed power that could lead to madness, societal collapse, or natural disasters. The rituals, therefore, were not simple acts of devotion. They were precise, calibrated operations, a spiritual technology designed to act as a regulator valve. They carefully opened a channel at a specific liminal point, a sacred well, a solstice alignment at a stone circle, to allow just the right amount of this otherworldly energy, this cosmic dark matter, to seep into the middle world, nourishing it without overwhelming it. The Druids were the master engineers of this process. They were the physicists of the unseen, understanding the properties and dangers of this fundamental force and knowing exactly how to mediate its flow for the benefit of all. If the sacred sites and liminal times were the laboratories and particle accelerators, then the Druids were the master scientists who knew how to operate them. They were far more than simple priests or shamans. They constituted a highly educated, intellectual elite whose training could span 20 years or more. Imagine committing 2 decades of your life to memorizing an immense body of knowledge: cosmology, law, philosophy, medicine, and complex astronomical cycles without ever writing a single word down. This was the core of their power, an oral tradition so vast and precise that it was considered a sacred trust. To put this knowledge into writing would be to rob it of its life force, to freeze a living river into a stagnant pool. This method of learning wasn't just about memorization, it was about internalization. A Druid didn't just know the stories of the gods, they understood the underlying principles those stories represented. They didn't just observe the stars, they could predict their movements with astonishing accuracy, seeing the heavens as a great turning clockwork that governed the rhythms of both the visible and the invisible worlds. This profound understanding of natural law is what earns them the comparison to quantum physicists. While they used a different language, one of myth and symbol rather than mathematics, they were essentially probing the same fundamental questions about the nature of reality. They observed cause and effect in the world around them with a scientist's eye. They knew which plants could heal and which could induce visions that might open a doorway to the other world. They understood animal behavior as signs of deeper cosmic shifts. Their role as intermediaries wasn't just about praying to the gods, it was about acting as a conscious conduit for the flow of energy between the realms. In a ritual at a stone circle during the solstice, the Druid was not a supplicant begging for favor. They were more like a technician, aligning the components of the ritual, the specific chants, the placement of participants, the timing down to the minute, to create a resonant frequency that would thin the veil between worlds. They were manipulating the variables to achieve a desired outcome, much like a physicist adjusting the parameters of an experiment. Consider their use of sound and language. The Celts held the spoken word to be incredibly powerful, believing that certain combinations of sounds could literally alter reality. The Druids' chants and incantations were not random prayers, they were precise sonic tools. We can think of them as attempting to find the resonant frequency of the dark matter itself, the hidden substrate of the cosmos. If the universe is indeed built upon vibrational strings, as some modern theories suggest, then the Druids, in their own way, were trying to hum the same tune as the universe. Their rigorous training allowed them to hold immense amounts of information in their minds, seeing patterns and connections that others would miss. This holistic knowledge allowed them to diagnose a problem in the tribe, a famine, a disease, not just as a local event, but as a symptom of a deeper imbalance in the relationship between the middle world and the unseen forces of the otherworld. Their ritual was the prescribed correction, a retuning of the cosmic instrument to restore harmony. They were the keepers of the operating manual for reality itself, making them the indisputable key figures in the Celts' quest to access and interact with the invisible architecture of the cosmos. And so, with the Druids as the master technicians of this cosmic interface, we must now turn our attention to the instruments they used, the very landscape itself. For the Celts, the land was not a passive backdrop for their lives. It was a living, breathing entity, a complex network of power points and energy lines. They perceived the earth as having a kind of spiritual anatomy, with specific locations acting as natural amplifiers, where the barrier between our world and the other world was stretched so thin it became almost transparent. These were the thin places, the sacred geography that formed the foundational architecture for their most profound rituals. Think of these locations not as random spots of beauty, but as naturally occurring resonant chambers for cosmic energy. The choice was never arbitrary. It was based on a deep, intuitive understanding of the land's unique properties. A secluded grove of ancient oaks, for instance, was considered immensely powerful. The oak tree itself was sacred, a symbol of strength and durability, but a grove represented something more, a convergence. The intertwining roots created a vast, unseen network beneath the earth, mirroring the hidden connections of the otherworld, while the canopy above formed a cathedral-like space, separating it from the ordinary world and making it a perfect, contained environment for ritual work. Similarly, water sources held a special significance. A spring, bubbling up mysteriously from the depths of the earth, was a direct manifestation of the lower world breaking through into the middle world. It was a literal portal, a place where the life-giving, purifying, and often prophetic energies of the otherworld continuously flowed forth. Rivers were seen as the arteries of the land goddess, carrying this sacred energy across the countryside, with their sources and confluences being points of particularly concentrated power. Perhaps no single site in Ireland better exemplifies this principle than the source of the River Boyne. This wasn't just a geographical feature, it was the heart of a vast mythological complex. According to legend, the Boyne was created when the goddess Bone, defying a taboo, approached a magical well called the Well of Segais. The well, overflowing with the water of wisdom and inspiration, surged up and chased her, forming the river that bears her name. The mythological message is clear. This is a place of dangerous, transformative knowledge, a direct conduit to the source of all wisdom in the otherworld. It is no coincidence that just a short distance downstream, the incredible passage tomb of Newgrange was built. The alignment of the tomb, designed to capture the first light of the winter solstice deep within its chamber, demonstrates an astonishing synthesis of sacred geography and celestial timing. The builders chose this specific location along a river born from a mythical well of knowledge to construct a machine, for lack of a better word, that would harness the power of the sun at its weakest moment, symbolically fertilizing the land with the energy of the otherworld at the year's darkest point. This was high-stakes cosmic engineering. On a broader scale, the Hill of Tara served as a different kind of power center. Unlike the secluded source of the Boyne, Tara was a place of assembly, the legendary seat of the High Kings of Ireland. It was not a solitary portal but a central switching station, a hub where the energies of the entire kingdom were believed to converge. The king's legitimacy was not just political, it was spiritual. He was wedded to the land itself, and his just rule was believed to maintain the balance between the worlds, ensuring prosperity. The mythology states that Tara was chosen because a Druid staff carried by a sacred bull first scraped the earth there, marking it as a place of sovereignty. But geographically, its position is also significant, a raised plateau with commanding views, a place between the earth and the sky. Rituals performed here, especially the inauguration of a king, were about aligning human law with cosmic law, tapping into the network of sacred sites across Ireland to channel the power of the otherworld for the benefit of the entire tribe. Even the very bones of the earth, the caves and mountains, played their role. A cave was a gateway into the womb of the Earth Mother, a place of darkness, initiation, and contact with the ancestors and chthonic deities of the lower world. A mountain like Croagh Patrick in Ireland was the opposite, a place to ascend closer to the upper world, to the celestial deities. The journey itself, the act of pilgrimage to these extreme locations, was a form of ritual, moving from the ordinary world into a liminal space of hardship and transformation. The choice of these sites was a testament to the Celtic genius for reading the landscape as a divine text. They understood that certain geological formations, a sudden spring, a lone hill on a plain, a cave mouth in a cliff face, acted as natural focal points for the energies they sought to access. Their rituals were then carefully designed to plug into these natural amplifiers, using the inherent power of the place to magnify their intentions and open a clearer channel to the unseen forces that shaped their reality. Building upon this sacred geography, the Celts developed a ritual calendar that functioned like a detailed schedule for accessing these power points. This was not a simple almanac for planting and harvest. It was a sophisticated cosmic timetable that identified precise moments when the flow of energy from the otherworld was at its most potent. The four great fire festivals Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, and Samhain were the cornerstones of this system. Occurring roughly midway between the solstices and equinoxes, these festivals marked the critical turning points of the year, the moments of maximum liminality in time itself. They were the annual windows of opportunity when the veil between the worlds was at its thinnest, and the invisible force the Celts sought to harness was most accessible. Take Imbolc, celebrated around the 1st of February. On the surface, it marked the beginning of the lambing season and the first faint signs of spring. But on a cosmic level, it was the moment when the life force of the otherworld, dormant during the deep winter, began to stir and push back into the middle world. The rituals of Imbolc, dedicated to the goddess Brigid, were designed to welcome and encourage this flow. People would clean their homes thoroughly, a physical act symbolizing the clearing of blockages to allow this new, vital energy to enter. They would light candles and fires not just for warmth, but as sympathetic magic, tiny, controlled echoes of the returning sun's power, meant to amplify the growing light and coax the life force from the unseen realm into the visible world. It was a delicate operation, an attempt to gently open the valve at the precise moment the cosmic pressure began to build. Then came Beltane on the 1st of May, the festival of unparalleled vitality and fertility. If Imbolc was about a trickle of energy, Beltane was about a torrent. This was the height of the light half of the year, when the sun's power was joined by the explosive life force of the earth. The rituals here were bold and communal, designed to fully merge the worlds. The most famous was the lighting of great bonfires on hilltops. Herds of cattle were driven between two such fires to be purified and blessed by the smoke, a direct infusion of the sacred fire's power into the community's wealth and sustenance. People would leap over the flames for luck and protection. These were not just celebratory acts, they were acts of conduction. The fire was a transformative agent, a point of extreme heat and light that served as a temporary gateway, channeling the raw, creative energy of the otherworld into the land, the animals, and the people. It was a collective effort to saturate the middle world with the invisible substance of life and prosperity at its annual peak. In contrast, Lughnasadh at the beginning of August was a festival of gratitude and consolidation. Named for the god Lugh, it celebrated the first harvest. The immense energy that had been unleashed at Beltane had now manifested as tangible food. The rituals shifted from invocation to thanksgiving. The focus was on the cutting of the first sheaf of grain, an act laden with significance. This was not just harvesting a crop, it was gathering the manifested energy of the otherworld, the dark matter made visible as sustenance. Communities gathered for games, feasts, and trial marriages, all activities that strengthened social bonds and celebrated the fruits of their alignment with the cosmic cycles. Lughnasadh was about acknowledging the success of their spiritual technology. The energy had been successfully drawn in, had done its work, and was now being integrated to ensure survival through the coming darker months. But the most powerful and arguably the most dangerous of these windows was Samhain, the festival that marks our modern Halloween. Celebrated on the 1st of November, Samhain was the Celtic New Year, the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. This was the ultimate liminal moment, a time that belonged neither to the old year nor the new. The Celts believed that on this night, the boundary between the worlds didn't just thin, it dissolved entirely. The spirits of the dead, along with all manner of otherworldly beings, could pass freely into the middle world. While this made it a time for honoring ancestors, it was also a period of great peril. The uncontrolled flow of energy from the otherworld was unpredictable and could be malevolent. Rituals were therefore protective and propitiatory. Bonfires were still lit, but their purpose was as a beacon of community and a protective barrier against chaotic forces. People would wear masks and disguises to confuse any hostile spirits that might be roaming abroad. Offerings of food and drink were left outside to appease these visitors. Samhain was not a celebration in the joyful sense of Beltane. It was a necessary, solemn negotiation with the fundamental, unseen power of the cosmos at its most raw and untamed. It was the annual recalibration of the relationship between the worlds, a critical reset before the cycle began anew with the quiet hope of Imbolc. Through this carefully orchestrated calendar, the Celts sought to live in a conscious, dynamic rhythm with the invisible forces they believed shaped their destiny. Of all the sacred moments in the Celtic year, Samhain stood apart, a night of such profound power that it transcended mere festival and became a grand, communal rite of cosmic necessity. Occurring at the end of October and beginning of November, this was the moment the wheel of the year stopped turning. It was a time outside of time, a crack in reality where the normal rules of existence were suspended. The harvest was in, the land was dying back, and the long, dark winter loomed. But for the Celts, this was far more than a seasonal shift. It was the ultimate thinning of the veil, a point where the membrane separating the middle world from the otherworld didn't just become translucent, it was believed to vanish completely. The gates of the Anon swung open, and the inhabitants of that unseen realm, both the beloved ancestors and more unpredictable, potent spirits, could walk freely among the living. This was not a cause for celebration in the joyful sense of Beltane. It was a period of immense spiritual danger and critical opportunity. The rituals of Samhain were not about festivity. They were acts of communal survival, a carefully orchestrated protocol for navigating this annual collapse of cosmic boundaries. The central, most symbolic act of the entire festival revolved around fire, the primordial element of transformation. In every community, a deliberate and profound silence would fall upon the hearths. Each family would carefully extinguish the fire in their own home, allowing the warmth and light that had sustained them through the year to die out. This was not an act of carelessness or simple preparation. It was a powerful collective gesture of surrender. By allowing their individual fires to go cold, the people were symbolically severing their connection to the old cycle, to the energy that had now been spent. It represented a return to a state of primal potential, a blank slate upon which the new year could be written. The world was plunged into a symbolic darkness, mirroring the encroaching winter and the chaotic, formless energy of the fully accessible otherworld. Into this collective void stepped the Druids. On a sacred hilltop, often at a place like the Hill of Tara, they would kindle a new, great fire. This was no ordinary flame. It was ignited using techniques known only to them, perhaps involving sacred woods and chants designed to call upon the pure, undiluted power of the cosmos. This was the druidic fire, the central bonfire around which the entire community would gather. This single flame represented something extraordinary, the primal energy source of the universe itself. If we extend our dark matter analogy, this fire was the visible manifestation of that invisible cosmic substrate, harnessed and concentrated by the Druid's skill. It was a spark from the engine room of reality. From this one sacred source, every household would then take an ember or a burning brand. They would carry this new fire back to their cold, dark homes and use it to relight their hearths. The significance of this action cannot be overstated. This was not just about practical light and heat. It was a ritual of reconnection. Each relit hearth fire was now a direct descendant of the central cosmic fire. It meant that the energy flowing into every home for the coming year was not the stale energy of the past cycle, but a fresh, purified current drawn directly from the source of the otherworld at the moment of its greatest accessibility. The community was, in effect, plugging itself back into the fundamental power grid of the universe. They were consciously drawing the raw, creative potential of dark matter into their daily lives, transforming it through the symbolic act of the hearth into sustenance, protection, and warmth for the long winter ahead. Alongside this profound fire ceremony, other rituals served as a necessary defense mechanism. With the boundary between worlds dissolved, the Celts believed that chaotic or malevolent forces could also cross over. The practice of wearing costumes and masks, which evolved into our modern Halloween tradition, had a deeply serious origin. People would disguise themselves not for fun, but to confuse any hostile spirits that might be abroad. By looking like one of the otherworldly crowd, they hoped to pass unnoticed, avoiding any ill intent. Great feasts were prepared, but an empty seat was always set at the table, and portions of food and drink were left outside the door. These were offerings, a gesture of hospitality designed to appease the visiting spirits and ancestors, ensuring their goodwill and encouraging them to bless the household rather than curse it. These acts of disguise and offering were a form of spiritual diplomacy, a way of negotiating the perilous landscape of a world temporarily flooded with unseen forces. Samhain was therefore the ultimate expression of the Celtic relationship with the invisible cosmos. It was a night of both extreme vulnerability and incredible potential, where the entire community participated in a high-stakes ritual to safely harness the pure, unmediated power of the otherworld and guide it consciously into their world, ensuring their survival and resetting the cosmic clock for another year. If Samhain was the great closing of a cosmic door, then Beltane, just 6 months later, was its explosive reopening, where the rituals of late autumn were shrouded in protective darkness and solemn negotiation with the unseen. The festival of Beltane at the beginning of May was a radiant, celebratory blaze of light and life. This was the joyous counterpart to Samhain's gravity, the vibrant peak of the year's light half, and its rituals were designed to harness a very different kind of energy from the otherworld. If we imagine the cosmic force the Celts sought to access as a vast reservoir, then at Samhain the flow was wild, untamed, and potentially dangerous. At Beltane, however, that same energy was at its most benevolent and creative, a pure, unadulterated life force meant to be welcomed with open arms. The entire festival was a grand, communal effort to merge the worlds in a celebration of fertility, vitality, and the absolute triumph of light over darkness. The most iconic and powerful symbol of this intent was the Beltane bonfire. On hilltops across the land, communities would gather to build immense pyres. But this was no ordinary fire. The wood was carefully selected, often including sacred trees like oak, and the fire itself was kindled in an ancient, ritualistic manner, by rubbing 2 pieces of wood together or using a spark from a previously sacred flame. This act of creation was a microcosm of the cosmic event they were celebrating, the friction and spark bringing forth a new source of power and light. As the flames leaped toward the sky, they were seen as a beacon and a conduit. The fire was a sympathetic link to the strengthening sun, a way of amplifying its energy here on Earth. But it was also a gateway, a point of intense heat and transformation where the vibrant, life-giving energy of the otherworld could be drawn directly into the middle world. The use of this sacred fire was anything but abstract. The entire community and their most valuable possessions were brought into direct contact with its power. The driving of cattle between 2 great bonfires is a perfect example. Herds were gathered and carefully guided through the smoke and between the flames. From a modern perspective, we might dismiss this as superstition, but seen through the Celtic cosmological lens, it was a sophisticated act of spiritual technology. The cattle were the primary measure of a tribe's wealth and sustenance. This ritual was a mass purification and blessing, a way of running the entire community's livelihood through a filter of cosmic energy. The smoke and the heat of the sacred fire were believed to cleanse the animals of any lingering malady or ill fortune from the dark winter months and to infuse them with the vitality of the coming summer. It was a deliberate act of charging their physical world with the invisible life force of the otherworld, ensuring the health and fertility of the herd for the year ahead. People would similarly leap over the smaller flames of the bonfires, a personal act of purification and a prayer for good fortune, literally jumping from the old energy into the new. Another central symbol of Beltane, the maypole, offers a fascinating glimpse into how the Celts might have visualized the connection between the worlds. On the surface, it's a joyous tradition of dance and ribbons, but its deeper symbolism is profound. The tall, central pole, firmly planted in the ground and reaching toward the sky, can be interpreted as an axis mundi, a world tree or cosmic pillar connecting the three realms. The base, buried in the earth, represents the lower world, the source of raw creative power. The shaft passes through our middle world, and the top points directly to the upper world of the heavens and celestial order. The act of winding colorful ribbons around this pole, weaving them in an intricate pattern, is a powerful metaphor. It represents the intertwining of these cosmic energies, the braiding together of the divine forces of the sky, the earth, and the unseen world into a single, cohesive flow of blessing for the community. The dance around the maypole was not just a celebration, it was a ritual act of weaving the fabric of reality itself, consciously binding the tribe's fate to the harmonious operation of the cosmos. The entire atmosphere of Beltane was one of sanctioned revelry and the temporary loosening of social norms. Courtship and marriage vows were often set aside for the night, reflecting a belief that the overwhelming creative force of the universe at this moment should be allowed to express itself freely. This was not about decadence, but about participation. By engaging in activities that celebrated fertility and joy, the community was aligning its own human energy with the immense creative pulse of the cosmos. They were becoming active participants in the ritual, their own vitality adding to the collective effort to draw down the blessings of the otherworld. Where Samhain was a cautious drawing in of power for protection and renewal, Beltane was an exuberant, outward explosion of that power into the world. It was the ultimate expression of a successful partnership with the unseen, a confident, joyous channeling of the dark matter of life itself to ensure the land would be fruitful, the people would be healthy, and the light would continue to reign. While the grand fire festivals represented a communal effort to manage cosmic energies, the Celts also pursued a far more intimate and, to our modern sensibilities, unsettling form of interaction with the unseen world. This brings us to one of the most profound and misunderstood aspects of their spirituality, the ritual veneration of the human head. Across the classical world, Greek and Roman historians wrote with a mixture of horror and fascination about the Celts' apparent obsession with severed heads. They described warriors hanging heads from their saddles, nailing them over the doorways of their homes, and even preserving the heads of particularly esteemed enemies in cedar oil to display as prized possessions. To dismiss this as mere barbaric trophy hunting is to miss the entire cosmological significance of the act. For the Celts, the head was not just another body part. It was the absolute center of a person's being, the sacred container of the soul, the seat of wisdom, personality, and most importantly, a person's unique animating force. This concept of a concentrated life force residing in the head is central to understanding the practice. They believed that a person's power, their minos or spirit, was not some abstract, disembodied ghost that floated away at death. It was a tangible, almost physical substance, a kind of spiritual energy or soul stuff that was most densely concentrated within the skull. This energy was the very essence that made a person who they were, their courage, their intelligence, their charisma. In a very real sense, this soul stuff was their personal contribution to the cosmic reservoir of dark matter, their individual share of the universal energy that flowed from the otherworld. When a great warrior or a wise chieftain died, that potent energy was at risk of dissipating back into the formless cosmos, lost to the community forever. But by preserving the head, the vessel that contained it, they believed they could capture and harness that power. The preservation of the head of a respected enemy, then, becomes an act of high spiritual significance, not just military pride. To defeat a powerful foe in battle was to prove your own strength was greater than theirs. But by taking their head, you were doing something far more consequential. You were capturing the source of their power. You were literally acquiring their minos, their soul stuff, and adding its strength to your own. This is why heroes in the Irish myths are often described as conversing with the severed heads of their enemies. They were not engaging in macabre fantasy, but seeking to access the wisdom and knowledge that was still contained within the captured essence. The head became an oracle, a source of counsel and prophecy, because the life force within it retained a connection to the otherworld. Similarly, preserving the head of a beloved ancestor was a way of keeping their guiding presence and protective influence actively within the family or tribe. The skull became a sacred relic, a direct link to a powerful spirit that could intercede on the community's behalf. This practice represents the most direct and physical expression of the Celtic relationship with cosmic energy. If the stone circles and fire rituals were about influencing the vast, impersonal flows of dark matter from the otherworld, then head veneration was about interacting with that energy on a human scale. It was a form of spiritual recycling, a belief that the potent essence of an individual could be contained, curated, and utilized. The cedar oil used in preservation was not merely a chemical. It was a sacred substance that prevented the precious soul stuff from decaying and escaping. The act of displaying the head at a sacred site or a chieftain's hall was a statement of spiritual sovereignty, a demonstration that one controlled not just land and people, but the very currents of power that animated them. In this light, the ritual treatment of the head emerges not as a sign of savagery, but as a sophisticated, if stark, theological statement about the nature of the soul and humanity's ability to interface directly with the substance of the cosmos. This concept of capturing and containing individual life force leads us to a broader, more fundamental principle that governed the entire Celtic relationship with the cosmos, the law of reciprocity. If the universe was a vast, interconnected system powered by an unseen energy, then maintaining its balance required a conscious give and take. This brings us to one of the most challenging aspects of their belief system for the modern mind to comprehend: the practice of offerings and sacrifice. It is crucial to move beyond the simplistic and often sensationalized idea of barbaric appeasement of bloodthirsty gods. For the Celts, sacrifice was not an act of fear. It was a sophisticated act of cosmic maintenance, a necessary transaction to keep the engine of reality running smoothly. Think of the entire cosmos as a living, breathing organism. The middle world, our world, was constantly being nourished by the life force flowing in from the other world. This energy manifested as sunshine, rain, fertile soil, healthy children, and victorious battles. But this was not a one-way street. The Celts perceived that for this flow to continue, something of equal value had to be sent back. It was a spiritual version of the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred or changed from one form to another. An offering, therefore, was not a bribe or a payment. It was a deliberate act of returning energy to its source, of completing a circuit. By giving something of value back to the cosmos, they were essentially powering the cycle, ensuring that the tap of blessings would not run dry. The nature of these offerings was carefully calibrated to the need. The most common sacrifices were of objects that held immense personal or communal value. A beautifully crafted sword, a finely worked piece of gold jewelry, or a cauldron used in feasts, these were not casually discarded items. Their value made the act of offering meaningful. By consigning such a precious object to a deep bog or a sacred lake, the community was demonstrating the depth of its commitment to the cosmic balance. They were sending a concentrated packet of human skill, effort, and wealth, a form of culturally created energy, back into the elemental waters of the otherworld. The countless artifacts recovered from peat bogs across northern Europe are not merely lost treasures. They are physical evidence of this enduring belief in a necessary exchange. When it came to living sacrifices, the principle was the same, but the stakes were infinitely higher. The sacrifice of an animal, particularly a valuable one like a prize bull or a strong horse, was a serious event reserved for moments of extreme crisis, a prolonged drought, a devastating plague, or the threat of invasion. The life of the animal represented a pure, unrefined form of the life force that sustained the middle world. By offering it, the Druids were conducting a direct energy transfer. They were releasing that concentrated vitality back into the cosmic system in a powerful, immediate burst, with the intention of shocking the system back into balance, of reigniting the flow of fertility and protection from the otherworld. The most extreme form of this human sacrifice was thankfully rare and surrounded by layers of sacred meaning that transform it from an act of sheer brutality into one of profound, albeit terrifying, spiritual significance. The victims were not random captives. Classical sources and later Irish myths suggest they were often individuals of high-status kings who had failed in their sacred duty, volunteers who offered themselves for the good of the tribe, or enemies whose captured power was to be returned to the gods in a grand gesture. The logic was an amplification of the principle behind head veneration. A human being, especially a noble one, contained the most potent concentration of life force imaginable. Their sacrifice was the ultimate offering, the most powerful fuel that could be poured into the cosmic engine. It was an act reserved for when the very fabric of the tribe's reality was unraveling, a desperate attempt to reweave it with the strongest thread available. In their view, the willing death of one could ensure the life of thousands, a tragic but necessary calculation under the stern law of cosmic reciprocity. This complex web of exchange, from the simplest offering to the most profound sacrifice, was the Celts' way of actively participating in the upkeep of the universe, a solemn responsibility to fuel the very forces that gave them life. Yet for all the potency of fire and sacrifice, the Celts also envisioned a more contained and deliberate method for harnessing the unseen energies of the cosmos. This brings us to one of the most iconic and mystical artifacts of their world, the cauldron. Far more than a simple cooking pot, the cauldron was a sacred vessel of transformation, a piece of ritual technology that symbolized the ultimate alchemy of turning the raw potential of the otherworld into tangible blessings for the community. In a world where scarcity was a constant threat, the promise of a cauldron that never emptied was the promise of cosmic abundance made manifest. The most famous of these was the cauldron of the Dagda, a chief deity often depicted as a figure of immense strength and paternal generosity. His cauldron was said to be bottomless. No company of warriors, no matter how large, could leave it hungry, but its magic went deeper than mere quantity. It was also a cauldron of plenty, meaning that it would never provide sustenance for a coward, thus imbuing the food with a quality of moral judgment. This was not a simple magic trick, it was a profound statement about the nature of the energy being channeled. The cauldron did not create something from nothing. Instead, it acted as a perfect conduit, drawing upon the infinite resources of the otherworld and transmuting them into the specific forms needed in the middle world. To understand its power, we must see the cauldron as the symbolic womb of the earth goddess herself. Just as a womb transforms raw biological elements into a new life, the cauldron was a container where the formless, chaotic energy of the cosmos, what we are calling dark matter, could be stirred, heated, and cooked into coherent, life-sustaining forms. The act of preparing a communal meal within it was a miniature ritual. The fire beneath represented the transformative power of the upper world, the celestial force of change. The cauldron itself, often made of iron and deeply rooted in the earth, represented the receptive, nurturing power of the lower world, and the ingredients within, the grains, the meats, the herbs, were the raw materials of the middle world. The druid or chieftain stirring the pot was not just a cook, they were a master of ceremonies, guiding the process of cosmic integration. The steam rising from the bubbling liquid was the very breath of the otherworld, carrying the essence of the blessing to the people who would partake. In this way, a simple meal became a sacrament, a physical ingestion of the harmonious energy flowing between the realms. This symbolism of transformation extends beyond food to the very essence of life and death. In the great Welsh epic, the Mabinogion, we encounter the cauldron of rebirth. This was not a vessel of sustenance, but one of restoration. Warriors slain in battle could be placed into this cauldron, and they would emerge alive once more, ready to fight again. The crucial detail, however, is that they would return mute, unable to speak of the secrets they had witnessed in the land of the dead. This story reveals a deeper layer of the cauldron's function. It was a mechanism for recycling spiritual energy, much like the practice of head veneration, but on a grander scale. The cauldron did not simply reverse death, it processed it. The warrior's life force, their personal soul stuff, was plunged back into the primal source, cleansed of its individual memory and identity, and then reconstituted for another cycle of use. It was a literal rebirth, but one that came at the cost of the individual's past. Their energy returned to the communal pool of the tribe's strength. This cauldron was the ultimate tool for managing the flow of vital energy between the worlds, ensuring that even loss in battle could be transformed into a renewable resource for the community's survival. The cauldron, therefore, stands as the perfect symbol of the Celtic cosmological system. It was a controlled environment, a sacred interface where the Druids, as spiritual technicians, could safely interact with the overwhelming power of the unseen. Unlike the wild, untamed energies of Samhain, the cauldron represented a domesticated, focused application of that same force. It was the promise that the chaotic potential of dark matter could be harnessed with wisdom and ritual precision to produce order, abundance, and even renewal. In the dark, iron curve of the cauldron, we see the entire Celtic worldview reflected, a universe of immense, invisible power waiting to be stirred into being. But of course, a ritual act of such profound significance required a language capable of carrying its weight, a script that could encode the very essence of the cosmic forces the Druids sought to command. This brings us to one of the most elegant and mysterious inventions of the Celtic world, the Ogham script. At first glance, it appears deceptively simple, a series of straight lines and notches carved along the edge of a stone or a piece of wood resembling a cryptic tally system. We might be tempted to see it as a primitive alphabet, a mere tool for recording names or marking territories, but to view Ogham in this limited way is to miss its true power entirely. For the Druids, Ogham was not just a method of writing, it was a sophisticated technology of resonance, a sacred code designed to interface directly with the animating spirit of the world. The genius of Ogham lies in its fundamental principle. Each character or feather is intrinsically linked to a specific tree or plant. This is the key to unlocking its purpose. The letter B or Beath is not an abstract symbol, it is the embodiment of the birch tree. The letter D, Djur, is the mighty oak. Each tree was understood to possess its own unique spiritual signature, its own store of what we might call specific cosmic energy. The birch, as a pioneer tree, represented new beginnings, purification, and potential. The oak, king of the forest, symbolized strength, endurance, and sacred wisdom. The hazel was associated with knowledge and inspiration, the alder with protection and oracular power. The Druids, with their deep ecological knowledge, perceived these botanical qualities as tangible manifestations of the unseen forces flowing from the otherworld. Therefore, to inscribe a Ogham character was not to write a letter, it was to invoke the entire spiritual essence of its corresponding tree. This transforms the act of writing into a high form of ritual. Imagine a druid carefully selecting a straight branch of yew or ash. As their knife carves the series of lines for a specific sequence of Ogham letters, they are not simply spelling a word. They are performing a precise operation like a technician wiring a circuit. They are connecting the latent power within the wood itself to the symbolic power of the trees represented by the script. The rod becomes a battery charged with a specific combination of natural energies. This charged object could then be used for a multitude of purposes. A healer might inscribe a charm for a sick person using the ogam for apple, associated with healing and regeneration, directing that restorative energy toward the patient. A poet seeking inspiration might carve the ogam for the hazel, the tree of wisdom, to open a channel to the wellspring of creativity in the otherworld. The most powerful applications involved inscribing ogam on standing stones, especially those placed at liminal sites like burial mounds or sacred wells. Here, the permanence of the stone acted as a perpetual amplifier. A stone carved with the ogam for oak at the boundary of a tribe's territory was not just a signpost saying "Land of the Oak People." It was an active ward, a metaphysical fence post that continuously projected the qualities of strength, stability, and sacred protection, creating a spiritual boundary reinforced by cosmic law. In this sense, writing in ogam was akin to writing a command line into the operating system of reality. The Druid, through their knowledge and intent, was coding a specific instruction, tapping into the pre-existing APIs of the natural world. The oak's strength, the blackthorn's harsh justice, the ivy's binding power, to produce a desired effect in the visible and invisible realms. It was a silent language spoken not to men, but to the universe itself, a way of whispering directly to the dark matter that wove the world together. But how exactly did the Druids know when and how to perform these rituals? How could they determine if the flow from the otherworld was optimal or if a dangerous imbalance was brewing? They needed a method of measurement, a way to take the cosmic temperature. This is where the practice of divination becomes absolutely critical. Far from being mere superstition or fortune-telling, Celtic divination was a sophisticated science of observation, a system for detecting subtle fluctuations, what we might call ripples in the invisible fabric of the cosmos. The Druids were acting as early cosmic meteorologists, developing intricate techniques to monitor the currents and eddies within the vast, unseen energy field they believed governed all things. One of the most respected methods involved interpreting the behavior of birds. This practice, known as augury, was based on a profound understanding of the natural world as a living reflection of the unseen. Birds, particularly those like ravens or eagles that soared high into the heavens, were seen as messengers moving freely between the realms. Their flight patterns were not random. They were thought to be directly influenced by the shifting currents of cosmic energy. A Druid would find a secluded, elevated spot, a liminal space between earth and sky, and carefully observe the specific species, the direction of flight, the number of birds, the sounds they made, and even the way they interacted with each other all held meaning. A sudden, clockwise circling of ravens might indicate an incoming blessing or a favorable omen for a battle, suggesting a harmonious, flowing energy from the upper world. Conversely, a frantic, scattered flight towards the west, the direction of the setting sun and the otherworld, could signal disruption, a warning of chaos or misfortune flowing into the middle world. The Druid was not just watching birds, they were reading a celestial language, interpreting the visible traces left by invisible forces on the most sensitive of creatures. For matters of immediate and grave importance, the Druids would turn to a more intense form of divination, extispicy, the examination of the entrails of a sacrificed animal. While this may seem grisly to us within their cosmological framework, it was the equivalent of using a high-powered microscope to study the fundamental state of the cosmic energy field. The animal chosen for this purpose was not killed casually. It was a valuable, healthy creature, often a sheep or a bull, whose life force represented a pure, concentrated sample of the vitality flowing into the middle world. Its sacrifice was a solemn act of offering, and in return, its body became a sacred text. the Druid, a master of anatomy, would meticulously examine the organs, the liver, the heart, the lungs. They were looking for anomalies, discolorations, unusual markings, swellings, or lesions. A healthy, symmetrical liver might indicate that the connection to the life-giving forces of the lower world was strong and clear. A deformed or spotted heart could be read as a sign that the tribe's central vitality was under threat, that a blockage or corruption existed in the flow of energy from the other world. This was not random guesswork, it was a detailed diagnostic procedure. The animal's body was a microcosm of the tribe's well-being, and its entrails provided a real-time physical report on the health of the invisible connections that sustained them. Beyond the external world, the Druids also looked inward to the realm of dreams. In the Celtic view, the state of sleep was another powerful liminal state, where the conscious mind's grip on reality loosened, allowing the soul to travel and perceive the deeper currents of the cosmos. Dreams were not fantasies, they were experiences, journeys into the otherworld or receptions of messages from it. Druids would practice incubation, sleeping in sacred places like burial mounds or near holy wells to receive prophetic visions. They believed that in the dream state, they could perceive the ripples of future events as they began to form in the unseen realm before manifesting in our own. A dream of a great flood might not be a literal prediction of water, but a warning of overwhelming emotional or social turmoil about to break. A vision of a thriving oak tree could signal a period of great strength and growth for the chieftain or the tribe. The interpretation of these dreams required immense skill and a deep understanding of symbolic language, as the messages from the otherworld were rarely literal. In essence, all these methods, from watching the sky to reading entrails to interpreting dreams, were different instruments for monitoring the same phenomenon. The Druids were convinced that the cosmic dark matter was not a static, inert substance. It was a dynamic, flowing field, and events in the middle world were preceded by detectable disturbances within it. A coming battle would create a ripple of conflict energy in the unseen realm long before the first spear was thrown. An impending drought would first register as a stillness or a withdrawal of the life-giving force. By developing these sophisticated techniques of observation, the Druids aimed to gain foresight. They were not trying to change a predetermined fate, but to understand the currents so they could navigate them more effectively. A negative omen was not a sentence, it was a warning to perform a specific ritual to rebalance the flow. A positive sign was a confirmation that their actions were in harmony with the cosmos. Through divination, they sought to read the hidden language of the universe itself, allowing them to act not as passive subjects of cosmic forces, but as conscious, participating architects of their shared reality. But this intricate monitoring of cosmic forces had to be translated into decisive action, especially when the ultimate test of a tribe's harmony with the unseen world arrived: war. For the Celts, battle was far more than a clash of men and metal. It was a supreme ritual drama played out on a bloody stage where the balance of cosmic power was decided. And at the very heart of this drama stood a unique and terrifying figure, the champion. Before the main armies collided in a chaotic melee, it was common for a single warrior, the very best the tribe had to offer, to step forward from the battle lines. He would issue a thunderous challenge, boasting of his own deeds and mocking the enemy, calling for their finest fighter to meet him in single combat. While this might seem like a display of primitive bravado, it was, in fact, one of the most sophisticated and high-stakes rituals in the Celtic world. The champion was not merely a skilled fighter, he was a sacred vessel, a living, breathing instrument chosen to channel the collective martial energy of his entire people and their gods. Think of the champion as a human lightning rod for the tribe's fortune. In the days and hours leading up to the battle, the Druids would have performed their divinations, taking the cosmic temperature. The warriors would have worked themselves into a frenzied state through chanting, drumming, and perhaps even the consumption of special potions, all designed to raise their collective minos, their fighting spirit, to a fever pitch. This energy was potent but diffuse, a swirling storm of emotion and intent. The ritual of single combat was the mechanism to focus this storm into a single, concentrated point. The champion became the tip of the spear, both literally and metaphysically. His body and spirit were the conduit through which this vast, invisible reservoir of power would be released. His fight was not for his own glory alone. It was a sacrificial act on behalf of the entire tribe. The outcome of his duel was believed to be a direct message from the Otherworld, a divine judgment on which side possessed the greater favor. This belief transforms the combat from a simple test of strength into a profound cosmological event. The space between the two armies became a temporary, violently charged liminal zone, a doorway to the Otherworld forced open by will and weapon. Every blow struck, every parry made, was seen as an exchange of spiritual force as much as physical force. When the champion roared his challenge, he was not just taunting a man, he was challenging the entire cosmic legitimacy of the enemy tribe. His victory would prove that his people's gods were stronger, that their connection to the source of power was more direct and potent. It would demonstrate that the flow of energy from the Otherworld was firmly on their side. This initial, focused release was intended to create a cascade effect. A win for the champion would pour his accumulated minos, now amplified by the favor of the gods, back into his own army, electrifying them with confidence and divine right. Conversely, it would shatter the enemy's morale, creating a crack in their spiritual armor, through which the main force could then smash with overwhelming effect. The champion's preparation and appearance were integral to his role. He might fight naked, covered in intricate blue-woad tattoos depicting sacred symbols and spirals that were believed to offer protection and channel supernatural strength. His weapons were not mere tools, they were consecrated objects, perhaps inscribed with Ogham symbols for the oak or the bull, designed to draw upon the specific energies of those powerful natural forces. In the Irish Ulster cycle, the greatest champion of all, Cu Chulainn, embodies this concept to an extreme. When his battle fury or Riostrad came upon him, he underwent a terrifying physical transformation, becoming a monstrous distortion of a man. This was not just literary exaggeration, it was a depiction of the champion as a being so overloaded with cosmic power that it warped his very humanity. He became a temporary incarnation of the god of war, a raw, uncontrolled eruption of the Otherworld's destructive potential onto the field of battle. The practice of ritual combat reveals the Celts' understanding of energy in its most dynamic form. Just as a druid might use a focused chant to resonate with a specific frequency, the tribe used the champion to resonate with the frequency of victory. It was a way of concentrating the diffuse hopes, fears, and willpower of hundreds of individuals into one explosive moment of truth. The duel was a microcosm of the entire battle, and by winning it, they believed they could preordain the outcome of the macrocosm. It was the ultimate expression of their belief that human action, when correctly ritualized, could directly manipulate the invisible currents of the cosmos, turning the tide of fate itself through a single, decisive point of contact. Yet this channeling of power was not reserved for the battlefield alone. The same principles that governed the warrior's duel also shaped one of the most important social rituals of Celtic life, the communal feast. In the great hall, surrounded by the flickering light of the central hearth, the tribe would gather to eat, drink, and listen to the bards, but this was far more than a simple meal for pleasure. It was a sacred act of consumption, a ritual designed to distribute the life force of the sacrificed animal throughout the community, with the most potent portion reserved for a very specific individual. At the center of this ceremony was the ancient and fiercely contested tradition of the hero's portion, a practice that turned the act of carving a roast into a high-stakes drama of status, power, and cosmic connection. The hero's portion was the choicest cut of meat, often a specific, large, and succulent section of the prized roast boar or bull. To be awarded this portion was the highest public honor a warrior could receive, a clear declaration that he was recognized by the chieftain and the tribe as their foremost champion. But the significance ran infinitely deeper than a mere compliment. In the Celtic worldview, the life force of the animal, its strength, speed, and vitality, did not simply vanish at the moment of its sacrifice. That energy, that concentrated soul stuff, was believed to remain within the meat. The act of eating was therefore a form of spiritual transfusion. By consuming the flesh, one was not just taking in physical nutrients, one was literally absorbing the quintessential qualities of the animal itself. To eat the muscle of a powerful bull was to take its strength into your own body. To consume the heart of a wild boar was to assimilate its ferocious courage. When the champion received the hero's portion, he was participating in a deliberate act of spiritual reinforcement. He was ingesting a massive, concentrated dose of the very vitality he needed to fulfill his role as the tribe's protector. This was not a passive honor, it was an active ritual of empowerment. The feast hall itself became a sacred space where the energy of the otherworld, manifested in the sacrificed animal, was being strategically redistributed. The champion was the designated vessel for this potent energy, the one individual whose body and spirit were considered strong enough to contain it and wield it for the collective good. His consumption of the portion was a public reaffirmation of the covenant between him, the people, and the divine forces that granted victory. It was a way of recharging his personal minos, ensuring that the cosmic favor he had demonstrated in battle would remain with him and by extension with the entire tribe. Naturally, such a prestigious award was not given lightly, and the claiming of it was often a source of intense, sometimes violent, conflict. The Irish epic, the Táin Bó Cúailnge, provides a stunning example of this tension. The story describes a feast held by King Ailill and Queen Medb of Connacht, where the hero's portion was to be awarded. The warriors of the Ulster tribe, the Red Branch Knights, were present, and each of their leading champions believed he was the most deserving. The resulting contest was not a polite debate but a series of escalating tests of strength and valor, each man striving to prove his superiority. This was not mere vanity. It was a deadly serious competition for the right to be the primary conduit for the tribe's martial power. To award the portion to an unworthy warrior was seen as a catastrophic mistake. It would be like pouring sacred, volatile fuel into a leaky container, wasting the energy and inviting misfortune. The ritual of the feast, therefore, served a crucial social function beyond the spiritual. It was a public forum for constantly reassessing and reaffirming the tribal hierarchy. The chieftain's decision of who received the portion was a powerful political statement, but it was a decision that had to align with the evident will of the gods as demonstrated by a warrior's proven deeds. A young, untested warrior could not simply claim the portion. He had to earn it through acts that visibly showed he possessed the necessary connection to the cosmic source of strength. The feast was the stage where this status was negotiated and displayed for all to see, ensuring that the person who would serve as the human bulwark against the tribe's enemies was without question the one most capable of bearing that immense responsibility. In this context, the hero's portion emerges as a perfect symbol of the Celtic understanding of a universe based on the flow and consumption of energy. Just as the land consumed the energy of the otherworld to become fertile, and just as the champion consumed the collective minos of his army to achieve victory, the ritual feast was the mechanism by which the tribe consumed the power of the natural world to sustain its own social and spiritual structure. Every bite was a prayer, every slice of meat a transaction with the unseen forces of creation, ensuring that the strength of the bull and the favor of the gods would flow continuously into the sinews of the warrior who stood guard over them all. Now consider the ultimate challenge of Celtic leadership, the selection of a king. This was not a matter of simple hereditary succession or political maneuvering. The king was more than a ruler, he was the living linchpin between the tribe and the cosmic order. His personal integrity and spiritual strength were believed to directly influence the fertility of the land, the success of battles, and the very balance between the worlds. So, in times of crisis or when the line of succession was unclear, how could the tribe be certain they were choosing the individual whose soul was truly in harmony with the will of the cosmos? The answer lies in one of the most potent and mysterious of all Celtic rites, the Tarb phase, the bull sleep. This was not a public coronation but a deeply esoteric, high-stakes ritual of divination, a procedure designed to bypass human bias and receive a direct mandate from the Otherworld itself. The ritual began with the careful selection of a specific bull, an animal that was far more than mere livestock. This bull was the embodiment of the tribe's vitality, a perfect specimen chosen for its strength, health, and majesty. It represented the concentrated life force of the people and their land. In a solemn ceremony, the bull was sacrificed. Its life was offered back to the source, a powerful gesture intended to open a clear channel of communication with the divine. Then the most crucial part of the operation began. A specially trained seer, a druid with a proven gift for prophecy, would prepare a sacred meal from the bull's flesh and organs, boiling them in a great cauldron to create a potent broth. The seer would then consume this meal entirely alone, ingesting not just the physical substance of the bull, but in the Celtic view, its very essence, its minos, its spiritual strength. Having consumed the bull's life force, the seer would then perform the act that gave the ritual its name. He would wrap himself in the fresh, bloody hide of the sacrificed animal and lie down to sleep, usually at a profoundly liminal site like a burial mound or a sacred cave, a place where the veil between the worlds was already thin. Wrapped in the skin, lying in a sacred tomb, the seer was symbolically entering the womb of the earth, encased in the vessel of the tribe's collective power. This was a state of ultimate liminality, neither fully awake nor asleep, neither living in the present nor dead in the past, wrapped in the skin of a being that was both of this world and now of the other world. In this cocoon of raw cosmic energy, the seer would fall into a drugged, dream-filled slumber, a state intentionally induced to open his consciousness to visions. The dream that followed was the entire point of the ritual. It was believed that the seer, now psychically fused with the spirit of the bull, would receive a clear and unambiguous vision of the next rightful king. He might see the man's face, hear his name, or witness a symbol that unmistakably identified him. This was not considered a metaphor or a suggestion. It was a divine revelation, a direct download of information from the cosmic source code. The bull acted as a spiritual amplifier and a conduit. Its immense life force, released through sacrifice and absorbed by the seer, provided the power necessary to pierce the veil and access the true knowledge of the otherworld. The seer was essentially using the bull's energy as a kind of bio-spiritual battery to fuel a journey into the unseen realm to retrieve the most critical piece of information for the tribe's future survival. Upon waking, the seer would reveal the identity of the chosen one, and the tribe would have its king, selected not by human hands, but by the invisible forces that governed their entire existence. The Tarb phase was thus the ultimate act of cosmic arbitration, ensuring that the person who would serve as the bridge between the worlds was the one truly worthy of the role. Now we arrive at one of the most debated and haunting spectacles in all of Celtic history, an account that has fueled imaginations and arguments for centuries, the ritual of the Wicker Man. The primary source for this practice comes from none other than Julius Caesar in his Gallic Wars, and it is crucial to approach his description with a critical eye. Caesar had a clear agenda to portray the Celts as savage barbarians in need of Roman civilization, which justified his military campaigns. His description is stark and terrifying. He claims the Gauls constructed a colossal humanoid figure out of woven wood, a giant effigy with multiple chambers inside. This immense structure was then filled with living people, condemned criminals, prisoners of war, and even, in times of extreme peril, innocent volunteers. The entire colossus was then set ablaze, a horrific pyre consuming its contents as an offering to the gods. It is easy to dismiss this as pure Roman propaganda, a monstrous fabrication designed to demonize an enemy. But what if we peel back the layer of sensationalism and look at this ritual through the lens of the sophisticated cosmic system we've been exploring? What emerges is not a tale of mindless brutality, but a story of ultimate, desperate cosmic engineering. To understand the Wicker Man, we must first consider the circumstances that would necessitate such an extreme act. This was not an everyday ceremony. It would have been a ritual of last resort reserved for moments of existential crisis. Imagine a scenario where the tribe is facing annihilation, a plague that has killed half the population, a drought so severe that the land is cracking open and the rivers have run dry, or the approach of an overwhelming enemy force. In the Celtic worldview, such catastrophes were not random bad luck. They were the ultimate symptoms of a catastrophic cosmic imbalance. The flow of energy from the Otherworld had not just diminished, it had been severed or corrupted. The normal rituals, the fire festivals, the animal sacrifices, the offerings in the bog had failed. The cosmic circuit was broken, and the tribe was facing spiritual and physical extinction. In this context, the Wicker Man begins to look less like an act of cruelty and more like a desperate, final attempt to reboot the entire system. The design of the effigy itself is deeply symbolic. This was not a random pile of wood. It was a giant, human-shaped vessel, a deliberate creation meant to represent humanity itself, or perhaps the collective spirit of the tribe. By constructing it on a massive scale, the Druids were creating a container of unprecedented size, a metaphysical capacitor designed to hold an immense charge of sacrificial energy. Filling it with living beings was the act of charging that capacitor. The choice of victims is significant. Criminals and prisoners of war represented energy that was already misaligned or hostile to the tribe. Their sacrifice was a way of purging this negative or foreign influence from the cosmic system, while simultaneously converting their life force into a usable form. The potential inclusion of willing volunteers adds another layer of profound gravity. It suggests an understanding that the pure, selfless sacrifice of a noble individual contained the most potent energy of all, a concept we saw in the ritual of the Tab phase. The act of ignition was the critical moment of release. The roaring flames consuming the giant figure would have been an awesome, terrifying sight, but in ritual terms, this was the moment of transmission. The fire was the transformative agent, the element that converts matter into energy. The combined life force of all the victims, a vast quantity of minos, was being vaporized and released in a single, concentrated burst. This was not an offering meant to gently coax the gods. It was a screaming signal fire directed at the heart of the Otherworld. The Druids were attempting to create a shockwave of sacrificial energy so powerful that it could blast through whatever blockage was causing the cosmic famine. They were, in effect, trying to jump-start the universe. By offering back an enormous quantity of life force all at once, they hoped to re-establish the principle of reciprocity on a grand scale, triggering a reciprocal flood of blessings, rain for the crops, health for the people, victory in battle, from the Otherworld in return. Viewed this way, the Wicker Man becomes a grim testament to the logical conclusion of the Celtic cosmic view. If the well-being of the many depends on a balanced exchange with the unseen, then in a true crisis, the sacrifice of the few for the survival of the many becomes a terrible, logical necessity. It was the ultimate expression of their belief that human action could and must intervene in the cosmic order. While the historical accuracy of Caesar's account will always be debated, interpreting the Wicker Man as a large-scale ritual of cosmic realignment allows us to see it not as a symbol of primitive savagery, but as the most extreme application of a complex and coherent theology, a final, desperate prayer shouted into the void with fire and flesh. Yet for all the power of fire, sacrifice, and physical combat, the Celts held a belief that might seem even more astonishing to our modern minds: the conviction that words themselves could be wielded as literal weapons, capable of inflicting tangible physical harm. In a society where honor and reputation were as vital as life itself, the most feared individual was not necessarily the strongest warrior, but the most skilled poet. These poets, or phili, were the masters of a terrifying art form known as satire, and their verses were not mere insults or political commentary. They were considered potent rituals, verbal spells so powerful that a well-aimed satire could raise boils on a king's face, drive a warrior to madness, or even cause the land itself to reject an unjust ruler. This was the ultimate refinement of the Celtic understanding of cosmic energy, the belief that language, when correctly formulated and charged with intent, could directly manipulate the invisible forces that bind a person to the world. To understand how this was possible, we need to grasp the Celtic concept of personal integrity, known as fur. A person's fur was their truth, their essential honor and cosmic standing. It was not just a moral quality, it was a tangible state of being, a kind of spiritual armor that kept them in harmony with the world around them. A king with strong fur would rule over a fertile and prosperous land. A warrior with solid fur would be protected in battle. This integrity created a smooth, harmonious flow of energy between the individual and the cosmos. But any act of dishonor, a broken oath, an unjust judgment, an act of cowardice created a crack in this armor. It introduced a flaw, a dissonance between the person's outward appearance and their inner reality. It was this crack, this hidden spiritual wound, that satire was designed to exploit. The act of composing a satire was a meticulous ritual. The poet would retreat into isolation, often for days, entering a state of intense focus not unlike a druid preparing for divination. This was not a spontaneous burst of anger, it was a deliberate gathering of power. The poet would meditate on the specific injustice, the precise nature of the flaw in the target's fur. Then they would craft their verse. Every word was chosen for its sonic quality and its symbolic meaning. The rhythm of the poem was designed to resonate with the frequency of the injustice itself. The resulting satire was not a long, rambling rant. It was a concise Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, and devastatingly accurate verbal arrow. When the poet finally delivered it, usually in a public setting before the tribe, the performance was a ritual release. The words, charged with the poet's authority and the collective recognition of the truth they contained, were launched into the cosmic field. The belief was that these words would travel directly to the target and attach themselves to the flaw in their fur. The satire acted as a catalyst, forcing the hidden inner corruption to manifest on the outside. The most common result described in the myths is the appearance of 3 blotches on the face, one of shame, one of dishonor, and one of falsehood. These were not metaphorical blemishes, they were believed to be physical, visible stigmata that marked the person as ritually polluted. A king who received these blemishes was no longer Fur Flathyman, a king of truth. His connection to the land was severed. The earth would cease to be fertile, the rivers might run dry, and his own people would be justified in overthrowing him. The satire had quite literally unmasked him, making his inner corruption visible to all and triggering a cosmic rejection. In this way, the poet served as an essential check on power, a living embodiment of cosmic justice whose words could topple tyrants without a single drop of blood being spilled, at least not initially. The legendary story of the poet Aethern the Importunate provides a chilling example of this power in action. Aethern was notorious for using satirical extortion, demanding vast amounts of treasure from Ulster's nobles under the implicit threat of a devastating satire. On one occasion, he demanded the king's own eye. The king, knowing the power Aethern wielded, actually plucked out his own eye and gave it to him rather than face the ritual destruction of his honor and kingship. This extreme tale underscores the absolute terror that a skilled poet could inspire. His words were not just sounds, they were considered as real and dangerous as a spear. The satire was the ultimate expression of the Celtic principle that reality is responsive to correctly applied intention. It was a technology of truth, a ritual weapon that ensured the cosmic balance of justice could be enforced not by armies, but by the unwavering voice of a single, courageous individual. But how could a society ensure that the powerful bonds between chieftains and warriors, so vital for survival, would endure beyond a single generation? The answer lies in one of the most brilliant and sacred social institutions of the Celtic world, fosterage. This was far more than a simple custom of sending a child to be raised in another household. It was a deeply ritualized act, a spiritual technology designed to weave the very fates of families together with threads stronger than iron. In a world where clan loyalty was everything, fosterage created alliances that were considered unbreakable because they were believed to be forged not just by mutual interest, but by the direct intermingling of cosmic energy between two tribes. At its heart, fosterage was an exchange. A chieftain would send his son or daughter to be raised by a trusted ally, often from the age of 7 until they reached 17. In return, the host family would receive their own child. On the surface, this was a practical arrangement. It was a way to secure political alliances, to ensure that the next generation of leaders would be educated by the finest warriors and druids outside their own kin, and to create a powerful network of obligation. But the underlying spiritual mechanism was infinitely more profound. The Celts believed that a person's unique essence, their individual soul stuff, was not fixed at birth. It was shaped and molded by their environment, by the people who raised them, and by the very land they grew up on. By sending a child to live with another family for their formative years, you were allowing their essential being to be permeated by the spiritual qualities of that other tribe. Think of it as a deliberate act of soul crafting. A child from the people of the oak, known for their strength and stability, would be sent to live with the people of the salmon, renowned for their wisdom and foresight. For 10 years, this child would eat their food, breathe their air, learn their stories, and absorb their customs. Their own innate oak energy would become intricately braided with the salmon energy of their foster family. They would, in a very real sense, become a living blend of both tribes. Upon returning home, this individual was no longer just a representative of their birth clan. They were a walking, talking embodiment of the alliance itself, a person whose very soul contained the combined spiritual signature of two distinct peoples. The bond created was considered stronger than blood kinship because it was a bond of choice, of deliberate creation, and of shared spiritual substance. This intertwining of fates created a web of obligation that was considered sacred, enforced by the gods themselves. The relationship between a foster parent and their charge was one of the most revered in Celtic society. The tales are filled with heroes who would sooner die than bring shame upon their foster father. The great Cu Chulain's most ferocious battles were often fought to avenge a slight against his foster family, showcasing a loyalty that transcended even his duty to his birth kin. This was because the act of fosterage was witnessed by the community and sanctified by the Druids. It was a cosmic contract. To betray a foster bond was not just a social crime, it was a spiritual offense, a tearing of the carefully woven cosmic fabric. It would create a dissonance in the truth of both families, inviting misfortune and divine displeasure. The network of fosterage thus created a stable, resilient social structure, where the failure of one chieftain to aid another was not merely a breach of protocol, but a rupture in the sacred order they had collectively built. The ultimate expression of this principle was the bond between foster brothers. Two boys raised together from childhood, sharing meals, training, and adventures, were considered to have a connection that rivaled that of biological siblings. Their souls were believed to have grown together, their individual energies harmonized through years of shared experience. In battle, foster brothers were expected to fight side by side, each drawing strength from the other's presence. Their loyalty was proverbial, a force that could turn the tide of a conflict. This was because their combined will was seen as a single, focused instrument. Just as a champion could channel the energy of his entire army, a pair of foster brothers could operate as a single, hyper-efficient unit, their coordinated actions creating a ripple effect of power and confidence through the ranks. Through the sacred ritual of fosterage, the Celts found a way to engineer kinship, to consciously expand the soul of the tribe beyond the limits of bloodline, weaving a social and spiritual tapestry strong enough to withstand the pressures of a dangerous and unpredictable world. But the sacred bonds of fosterage, which wove the fates of human families together, were only one expression of a much broader Celtic conviction that the entire natural world was alive with consciousness and divine presence. Nowhere was this belief more vividly expressed than in their relationship with animals. This was not a simple matter of hunting prey or domesticating beasts of burden. For the Celts, certain animals were sacred portals, living familiars and direct messengers from the otherworld, whose behavior and very essence offered a crucial window into the workings of the invisible cosmos. They believed that creatures like the boar, the stag, the horse, and the salmon possessed a natural, innate attunement to the cosmic forces that humans could only access through arduous ritual. Interacting with these animals, therefore, became one of the most direct methods for tapping into that hidden power. Consider the wild boar, an animal that features prominently in myth and archaeology. On one level, it was the ultimate symbol of ferocity, strength, and untamed nature, a formidable hunt that tested a warrior's worth, but its significance ran far deeper. The boar was intimately associated with the otherworld. In many tales, magical boars are not mere animals. They are otherworldly beings sent to test or guide heroes or even deities in disguise. The boar's habit of living deep in the forest, in the shadowy realms between light and dark, marked it as a creature of the liminal spaces. Its sudden, explosive charge from the undergrowth was seen as a violent eruption of otherworldly power into the human realm. To hunt a boar was not just to secure meat, it was a ritual engagement with a divine force. The act of consuming its flesh, especially at a sacred feast, was believed to transfer a portion of that raw, aggressive vitality to the warrior, charging him with the boar's own indomitable spirit for the battles to come. Similarly, the stag commanded awe and reverence, with its majestic antlers that cyclically shed and regrow, mirroring the death and rebirth of the seasons. The stag was a powerful symbol of regeneration, sovereignty, and connection to the forest's spiritual authority. It was often seen as a guide. In numerous stories, a magnificent white stag appears to a hunter or a king at a crossroads, leading them deep into the wilderness on a chase that ends not with a kill, but with a profound encounter at a sacred well or a clearing where the hero is tested or granted a vision. The stag's role was to lead humanity from the familiar paths of the middle world into the mysterious liminal heart of the forest, the domain of the gods. Its appearance was an omen, a sign that the veil was thin and that a message or a test from the otherworld was at hand. To ignore such a sign was to risk divine displeasure, while to follow was to embark on a quest that could redefine one's destiny. In the realm of domesticated animals, the horse held a place of supreme importance, particularly for the aristocratic warrior class. More than a status symbol, the horse was a partner in sovereignty and a conduit to the divine. Goddesses like Epona and Macha were depicted as horse deities, embodying fertility, sovereignty, and the raw power of the land. A king's ability to control a powerful steed was a visible metaphor for his ability to rule justly and master the chaotic forces of his kingdom. The horse, with its speed and grace, was seen as a creature that could traverse the boundaries between the worlds. Rituals involving horses, such as the inauguration of a king where a white mare was symbolically mated with the new ruler, were not acts of barbarism but profound ceremonies of union. The king was ritually marrying the spirit of the land, represented by the horse, to ensure his reign would be blessed with fertility and prosperity. The health and vitality of the royal horses were thus directly linked to the health of the kingdom itself, their hooves beating out a rhythm that kept the tribe in sync with the pulse of the earth. But perhaps the most fascinating example of animal as conduit is found not on land but in the water with the salmon. The Celtic reverence for the salmon reveals a sophisticated understanding of cyclical journeys and hidden knowledge. The salmon's incredible life cycle, born in a freshwater river, traveling to the distant, mysterious ocean, and then returning with uncanny precision to its exact birthplace to spawn and die, made it a powerful symbol of wisdom, rebirth, and profound connection to the unseen forces that guide existence. The ocean was the ultimate unknown, a vast, chaotic realm that bordered the otherworld. The salmon's journey there and back was seen as a voyage into the source of all knowledge and a return with its secrets. This belief is crystallized in the magnificent myth of the Salmon of Wisdom. The story tells of a solitary salmon living in the pool of wisdom on the river Boyne, the very river born from a goddess's transgression. This salmon had gained all the knowledge in the world by consuming 9 hazelnuts that fell from 9 sacred hazel trees into the pool. The Druid fingers spent 7 years trying to catch this fish, knowing that whoever tasted its flesh would inherit its boundless wisdom. He finally succeeded, but entrusted the cooking of the salmon to his young apprentice, Fionn mac Cumhaill. As the fish cooked, a blister formed on its skin. When Fionn pressed his thumb on the blister to stop it from bursting, he burned his thumb and instinctively put it in his mouth to cool the pain. In that moment, he inadvertently absorbed the salmon's wisdom. When Fingers saw the light of knowledge in Fionn's eyes, he understood that the boy was the destined recipient and bestowed the entire salmon upon him. This myth is a perfect allegory for the Celtic view of animal intermediaries. The salmon did not merely possess knowledge, it was a living repository of it, a creature that had physically ingested and contained cosmic truth. Consuming it was not a metaphor, it was a literal act of transference, a ritual of ingestion that allowed a human to bypass years of study and directly assimilate the hidden knowledge of the universe. The salmon, by its very nature and journey, was a perfected vessel for the wisdom of the otherworld. Ultimately, the sacred status of these animals stems from a core belief that they were naturally more permeable to the currents of the invisible world than humans. They lived their entire lives immersed in the rhythms of nature, their instincts finely tuned to shifts and patterns that people could only perceive dimly. A bird's flight, a stag's appearance, a salmon's leap, these were not random events. They were the visible ripples caused by the stirrings of the cosmic dark matter. By observing them, hunting them with reverence, and in some cases consuming them in sacred rituals, the Celts believed they could align themselves with these pure currents of power. The animals were not just symbols, they were active participants in the cosmic drama, essential guides and familiars on humanity's quest to understand and navigate the vast, unseen architecture of reality. And so we come to the pinnacle of Celtic kingship, the ultimate ritual that bound the fate of a mortal ruler to the very soul of the cosmos, the sacred marriage or hieros gamos. This was not a political coronation or a simple transfer of power. It was a profound mystical union, a wedding ceremony between the human king of the middle world and the eternal spirit of the land herself, the sovereignty goddess who embodied the limitless power of the otherworld. In this singular act, the abstract flow of cosmic energy we have been calling dark matter was given its most direct and tangible expression, channeled through the body of the king to bless and fertilize the entire kingdom. The ceremony itself was layered with potent symbolism, but one of the most striking and misunderstood elements was the role of the horse. In a ritual that would seem shocking to modern eyes, the goddess of sovereignty was often represented by a pure white mare. The incoming king would then engage in a symbolic coupling with the animal, after which the mare would be ritually sacrificed, boiled in a great cauldron, and the king would bathe in the broth while partaking of the meat. To view this through a purely literal lens is to miss the entire point. The white mare was not merely an animal, she was the living incarnation of the land goddess Epona, Macha, or Rhiannon, a creature revered for its strength, grace, and deep connection to the fertile earth. By uniting with her, the king was not performing an act of bestiality, but of cosmic consummation. He was ritually marrying the spirit of the territory he was sworn to protect. The subsequent sacrifice and consumption was the final, irrevocable act of union. The king was literally bathing in and ingesting the essence of the goddess, absorbing her vitality, her wisdom, and her power, transforming himself from a mere man into the true husband of the land. We see a powerful echo of this in the Irish legend of the goddess Matcha. Forced to race against the king's horses while heavily pregnant, she wins but collapses at the finish line, giving birth to twins and cursing the men of Ulster with the weakness of childbirth in their times of greatest peril. This story is a stark lesson about the consequences of mistreating the sovereignty goddess. A king who fails to honor his sacred partner, who seeks to dominate rather than unite with her, severs the very connection that grants him and his people their strength. The curse of the Ulstermen in the Tain Bo Cuelge, their periodic debilitating weakness, is a direct result of this broken covenant, a cosmic imbalance caused by a king's failure to uphold his side of the sacred marriage. When the union was successful, however, the results were manifest in the physical world. A king in right relationship with the goddess was a king whose reign was marked by abundance. The fields would be fertile, the cows would give abundant milk, the rivers would be full of fish, and the people would be healthy and prosperous. This was not seen as a metaphorical blessing. It was a direct causal relationship. The king served as the living conduit, the tuned antenna through which the life-giving energy of the otherworld, the creative, ordering force of dark matter, could flow unimpeded into the middle world. His justice, his strength, and his personal integrity were the qualities that kept this channel open and clear. If he ruled with with truth, the energy flowed freely. If he became unjust, greedy, or weak, the channel constricted, and the land would reflect this failure through blight, drought, and disorder. This concept is beautifully illustrated in the Welsh tale of Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed. While out hunting, Pwyll encounters Aron, a king of the otherworld. They strike a bargain and exchange places for a year, with Pwyll agreeing to rule Aron's kingdom and defeat his rival. The crucial test comes when Pwyll, in Aron's form, is lying beside Aron's wife. He spends the year sharing her bed but never touches her, an act of immense restraint and respect. When he returns to his own world and defeats Aron's enemy, he has proven his honor. Because of this, he earns the title Pwyll Pen Anrhyddan, or Pwyll, head of the otherworld, and later wins the hand of the goddess Rhiannon. His story demonstrates that the right to unite with the sovereignty goddess is earned not through brute force, but through integrity, wisdom, and the ability to navigate the delicate boundaries between the worlds with respect. The sacred marriage was therefore the ultimate act of cosmic engineering. It placed a human being at the very center of the universal exchange system, making him personally responsible for maintaining the balance. He was the regulator valve for the flow of cosmic energy into his kingdom. His marriage was a living ritual that continually renewed the contract between the visible and invisible realms. Every act of just judgment from his court was a reaffirmation of this vow. Every successful harvest was a sign of the goddess's favor. This ritual encapsulates the entire Celtic worldview, a universe alive with conscious, interactive force, where humanity's highest calling was not to dominate nature, but to enter into a sacred partnership with it, to become a conscious participant in the great work of weaving the visible world from the infinite, unseen threads of the cosmos. Beyond the thundering rituals of battle and the solemn chants of the Druids, the Celts possessed a far more intimate and direct technology for piercing the veil: the sacred, deliberate use of psychoactive plants. While the grand stone circles and hilltop fires served as massive, communal antennae to channel cosmic energy, these botanicals were the personal keyholes, the meticulously crafted tools that allowed a single individual to peer directly into the swirling currents of the otherworld. This was not a form of recreation or escapism. In the hands of a trained seer, a brew of henbane or a carefully measured dose of mushrooms was a precision instrument, a sacred technology for achieving a state of consciousness where the invisible architecture of the universe became temporarily perceptible to the human senses. The very landscape of the Celtic world was a living pharmacy of visionary plants. Henbane, with its powerful tropane alkaloids, could induce vivid, often terrifying, hallucinations and a sensation of flight. Certain species of mushrooms, like the liberty cap, which thrives in the damp, grassy fields of northern Europe, contain psilocybin, a compound known to dissolve the ego and create profound feelings of connection to a larger, animate reality. Even their fermented beverages, like mead or certain potent beers, were likely more than simple intoxicants. They could have been brewed with additives like mugwort or belladonna, herbs known for their dream-enhancing and trance-inducing properties. The crucial distinction lies in the context and the intent. These substances were not consumed in a tavern for merriment. They were administered by a druid or a seer in a strictly controlled ritual setting, perhaps within the confines of a dark, enclosed chamber tomb or a secluded forest grove, as part of a spiritual quest for knowledge. Imagine a druid having spent days in fasting and purification, preparing to seek an answer to a critical question threatening the tribe. He would consume a carefully prepared potion, its ingredients and proportions a closely guarded secret of his oral tradition. As the substance took hold, the solid walls of the middle world would begin to waver and dissolve. The familiar sensation of a single, isolated self would melt away, replaced by an overwhelming perception of being part of a vast, interconnected web of life. This was the thinning of the veil made experientially real. In this heightened state, the swirling patterns in the smoke of a fire might coalesce into the faces of ancestors, and the rustling of leaves might articulate itself as the whispers of nature spirits. The druid was not merely hallucinating. From his perspective, he was temporarily granted the senses to perceive the constant, chattering activity of the otherworld that was always present, just beyond normal perception. This direct access had a clear and practical purpose: prophecy and healing. A chieftain uncertain about the outcome of a battle might seek a vision to know which course of action would align with the cosmic currents. A healer trying to diagnose a mysterious illness could enter a trance to perceive the spiritual imbalance or malevolent influence causing the physical affliction. In this altered state, the dark matter of the Celtic cosmos, the invisible, animating force that governed health, fortune, and fate, wasn't an abstract concept. It could be felt as a tangible energy field, seen as a luminous web connecting all things, or heard as a resonant hum underlying all of creation. The information gathered in these voyages was then interpreted upon the seer's return, providing guidance that was considered divinely inspired and therefore beyond question. The risks, of course, were immense. These plants were powerful and could be poisonous if misused. An uncontrolled journey could lead to madness or a failure to fully return to the confines of the ordinary self. This is precisely why their use was restricted to a trained elite. The druid was not just a passive passenger on this journey, he was the navigator. His years of mental and spiritual training allowed him to maintain a thread of consciousness, a sacred anchor that enabled him to travel into these chaotic realms and return with coherent insights. He knew the songs to sing, the breaths to take, and the symbols to focus on to guide the experience toward a productive end. This controlled use of psychoactive plants represents the ultimate refinement of the Celtic quest to interface with the unseen. It was the most daring and direct method of all, a conscious chemical unlocking of the doors of perception to stand face to face with the fundamental, swirling energy that they believed breathed life into the world. Yet for all its power and sophistication, this entire cosmic system, this intricate technology for interacting with the unseen, could not withstand the arrival of a new force that would reshape Europe from the ground up. The spread of Christianity across the Celtic lands was not merely a change in religious fashion. It was a seismic cultural upheaval. Roman legions and, more lastingly, monastic missionaries carried with them a worldview that was fundamentally at odds with the Celtic vision of a layered, animistic cosmos. The new faith proclaimed one God in heaven, a single divine authority who ruled over a creation that was separate from himself. The countless spirits of the wells, the trees, and the stones were now recast as demons or mere illusions. The Druids, the master engineers of the old ways, saw their authority systematically dismantled, their sacred groves cut down, and their rituals outlawed. It seemed for a time as if the ancient knowledge of the Celts would be completely erased, its secrets lost forever beneath the foundations of new churches and the pages of monastic manuscripts. But the old cosmology was too deeply rooted in the land and the people to simply vanish. Instead of disappearing, it performed a remarkable act of spiritual camouflage. It went underground, resurfacing in a new, disguised form through a process scholars call syncretism, the blending of different beliefs into a new hybrid system. The Christian missionaries, often pragmatic in their methods, realized that it was far easier to redirect existing devotion than to eradicate it completely. And so, the sacred geography of the Celts was given a Christian rebranding. A holy well once dedicated to a local goddess of healing would be rededicated to Saint Bridget, who inherited many of the goddess's attributes. A powerful spring seen as a mouth of the Otherworld would now be associated with Saint Patrick or Saint Columba. The pilgrims still came, they still left offerings, and they still believed in the water's curative powers. Only now they directed their prayers to a Christian saint instead of a pagan deity. The location's inherent spiritual power, its status as a thin place, remained utterly unchanged. The door to the unseen was still there, it just had a new nameplate on it. This transformation is vividly clear in the evolution of the great annual festivals. Samhain, the night when the veil dissolved and the spirits walked, was too powerful a concept to discard. The Church strategically placed All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day on November 1st, followed by All Souls' Day on November 2nd. The night before All Hallows' Eve seamlessly absorbed the ancient traditions of Samhain. The belief in roaming spirits was preserved, but now they were the souls of the faithful awaiting prayer. The practice of leaving out offerings of food became the giving of soul cakes to the poor in exchange for prayers for the dead. The protective bonfires still burned, but now they were in honor of the saints. The masks worn to confuse malevolent spirits evolved into the costumes of Halloween. The underlying cosmology that the boundary between worlds is thinnest at this time survived entirely intact, simply wrapped in a new theological narrative. The cosmic valve was still being opened and closed. The ritual had just been given a new liturgy. Even more persistent than the repurposed festivals was the enduring belief in the otherworld itself, which found a safe haven in Christianized folklore. The powerful deities and spirits of the old religion could not be worshipped openly, but they did not cease to exist in the popular imagination. They diminished in size and stature, becoming the owls she or the good people, the fairies. These were not the tiny, whimsical pixies of later Victorian literature. They were the formidable, often dangerous inhabitants of the otherworld, living in their underground forts and fairy mounds, the very same Shia that were once the gateways for the Druids. Belief in them was widespread and serious. To disturb a fairy ring of mushrooms or to build a house on a fairy path was to invite catastrophe. The fairy folk represented the enduring, untamable power of the old cosmos, a constant reminder that an unseen world existed parallel to our own, with its own laws and its own often capricious will. This survival of the fairy faith is perhaps the clearest evidence that the Celtic concept of dark matter never truly died. The fundamental idea of a pervasive, influential, invisible reality just beneath the surface of our own continued to shape daily life for centuries. Farmers would leave a corner of their field untilled, the fairies' portion, as an offering to ensure the fertility of the rest. Certain trees, like the hawthorn standing alone in a field, were left untouched because they were beloved by the good people. These were not superstitions, they were the last echoes of the law of reciprocity, the understanding that humanity must maintain a respectful relationship with the unseen forces that govern the world. The fairy kingdom became the Christian-era container for the Celtic Otherworld, a way of keeping the ancient cosmology alive in a form that the new religious authorities would tolerate or at least overlook. This tenacious undercurrent of belief ensured that the essence of the Druids' knowledge, the perception of an animate, spiritually charged universe, flowed like a hidden river through the Middle Ages and into the modern era. It surfaced in the practices of the cunning folk, the local healers and wise women who used charms and herbs that owed as much to pre-Christian tradition as to Christian prayer. It infused the folklore collected by writers like W.B. Yeats and Lady Gregory, who recognized in these stories the fragments of a lost mythology. The rituals had gone underground, the language had changed, but the core perception remained, that our world is interwoven with another, an unseen dimension of immense power and vitality that can, with the right understanding, be perceived and respectfully engaged. The dark matter of the Celts had not been disproven or destroyed, it had simply learned to wear a disguise. So this ancient conversation with the unseen did not simply end, it transformed, its core ideas flowing like an underground river, surfacing in surprising ways throughout the modern era. The old gods may have been dethroned, but the fundamental Celtic perception of a world alive with invisible, conscious force proved incredibly resilient. It found sanctuary first in folklore, where the powerful deities of the otherworld diminished in stature but not in presence, becoming the formidable Owls-She, the fairy folk. Belief in these beings was not child's play. It was a serious, practical acknowledgement that the landscape was shared with another race, whose goodwill was essential for prosperity. The custom of leaving a portion of the field unharvested for the good people, or of avoiding certain hawthorn trees known as fairy thorns, were direct descendants of the ancient law of reciprocity. These were not mere superstitions, but the last living echoes of the Druidic understanding that humanity must maintain a respectful relationship with the intelligent, unseen forces that animate the world. This enduring undercurrent then swelled into a powerful cultural wave during the Romantic movement of the 18th and 19th centuries, as industrialization began to sever humanity's connection to the natural world. Artists and writers looked back to the Celtic past with a sense of longing. Figures like William Butler Yeats and Lady Augusta Gregory didn't just collect old stories, they recognized in them the fragments of a complete, sophisticated cosmology that offered an antidote to a disenchanted world. Yeats, in particular, was obsessed with the idea of the anima mundi, the world soul, a concept that mirrors the Celtic belief in a universal, permeating consciousness. His poetry is saturated with images of twilight, veils, and spirit messengers, directly channeling the ancient Celtic sense of a reality layered with invisible meaning. For these literary pioneers, the old myths were not escapist fantasy. They were a map to a more authentic way of being, one that acknowledged the sacred mystery woven into the fabric of existence. This literary revival provided the fertile ground from which modern spiritual movements like Neo-Druidry and Wicca would spring in the 20th century. While these are distinct traditions with their own complexities, they share a common root in the desire to reclaim a direct, experiential relationship with the divine, often conceived as immanent within nature. The Wiccan Rede, "and it harm none, do what ye will," echoes the Celtic concern for balance and consequence, while the veneration of a goddess and a god reflects the old duality of the fertile land and the untamed sky. The Wiccan Wheel of the Year is a direct homage to the 4 Celtic fire festivals and the solstices and equinoxes, creating a modern ritual calendar that seeks to realign human life with the sacred cycles of the earth. Similarly, contemporary Druidry, while often more philosophical and less prescriptive, focuses on the sacredness of the natural world, the cultivation of wisdom, and the concept of living in a way that honors the interconnectedness of all things. These are not precise historical reenactments. We simply lack the full blueprint of ancient practice, but rather inspired reimaginings, attempts to rebuild a bridge to the unseen using the stones that history has left us. Perhaps the most astonishing development, however, is how this ancient world view is finding a strange and powerful resonance in the language of modern theoretical physics. The Celtic concept of the otherworld, an all-pervading, invisible reality that underpins and influences our own, bears an uncanny resemblance to our current scientific understanding of the universe. We now know that the seemingly solid world around us is mostly empty space, and that what we perceive as reality is governed by invisible fields and mysterious substances. Dark matter, which makes up over 85% of the universe's mass but neither emits nor reflects light, is the ultimate unseen force, its gravitational influence holding galaxies together. This is not so different from the Celtic notion of an anon whose power shapes the fortunes of the middle world. Furthermore, quantum field theory suggests that at the most fundamental level, the universe is a seething ocean of potentiality where particles flicker in and out of existence. This quantum foam sounds remarkably like the formless, creative chaos of the Celtic lower world, the raw potential from which all manifested life emerges. This parallel suggests that the ancient Celts, in their own metaphorical and intuitive way, may have been grappling with the same fundamental mysteries that occupy our greatest scientists today. They observed the effects of an invisible force, the growth of a plant, the pull of the tides, the mystery of consciousness, and built a complex metaphysical system to explain it. We use mathematics and particle accelerators, but both journeys are driven by the same profound human impulse to understand the hidden architecture of reality. The Druid seeking to harmonize the tribe with the cosmic flow through ritual, and the physicist seeking a unified theory of everything are, in a sense, kindred spirits. They are both attempting to read the secret language of the universe, to comprehend the invisible threads that bind the cosmos into a coherent whole. This enduring fascination reveals a timeless truth about the human condition. We are innately aware that there is more to existence than meets the eye, and across centuries and cultures, we have continually devised new languages, mythological, spiritual, and scientific, to explore the great unseen tapestry of which we are a part. From the quiet hum of the cosmos sensed in a sacred grove to the roaring flames of the Beltane fire, our journey through the secret world of the Celts reveals a civilization that was anything but primitive. We began by challenging the modern assumption that their rituals were simple acts of earth worship, proposing instead that they were the expressions of a lost cosmological science. The Celts perceived an all-pervading, invisible reality, the anon, or otherworld, which they understood as the fundamental substance influencing every aspect of their lives. This was not a vague spiritual notion. It was a coherent, logical system built upon observable cause and effect. When the harvest failed or a king ruled unjustly, they saw it as a rupture in the flow of energy from this unseen realm, a cosmic imbalance that demanded ritual correction. Their entire way of life can be seen as a sophisticated technology for interacting with this cosmic substrate. The Druids were not mere priests but master physicists of the unseen, trained for decades to memorize the intricate laws governing the relationship between the worlds. They identified natural amplifiers in the landscape, the thin places like sacred wells and stone circles, and developed a precise calendar of fire festivals to act as scheduled maintenance on the cosmic interface. Through rituals ranging from the communal ingestion of the hero's portion to the high-stakes arbitration of the Tab phase, they sought to regulate the flow of this vital energy. Even their most challenging practices, from head veneration to the accounts of the Wicker Man, emerge not as mindless brutality but as extreme applications of a consistent theological principle, that the well-being of the visible world depends on a conscious, reciprocal exchange with the invisible source of all power. This was a system where every action, from a king's marriage to the land to a poet's satirical verse, was a deliberate act of cosmic engineering. It is a profound irony that the very missionaries who sought to extinguish these pagan beliefs inadvertently became the preservers of the Celtic cosmic view, baptizing holy wells and rebranding festivals so the old ways could survive in a new guise. And today, as we peer into the depths of space with our most powerful telescopes, we find ourselves grappling with a mystery that would have felt deeply familiar to a Druid, the enigma of dark matter. We now know that the galaxies are held together by the gravitational grip of an invisible substance that makes up the vast majority of the universe's mass. Our quest to detect these elusive particles with billion-dollar experiments is, in its essence, the same quest the Celts embarked upon with bonfires and chants. Both are driven by the fundamental human need to understand the invisible architecture of our reality. Perhaps the greatest lesson from the Celts is not about the specific nature of dark matter, but about the nature of curiosity itself. They remind us that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than it appears, and that our drive to map its hidden contours is a timeless human impulse. They looked at the world and saw not a collection of separate objects, but a single, living entity vibrating with unseen connections. As you go about your day, consider the mysteries that still surround us. What unseen forces might be shaping our reality, waiting for a new language, be it mathematical or mythological, to give them voice? The Celts dared to answer that question with a system of breathtaking complexity and beauty. What secrets do you think are still hidden in the silence between the stars or in the forgotten corners of our own world? Share your thoughts on these ancient secrets in the comments.